In the last decades, the world have suffered changes that, thanks to the events that I'm going to present next, we live in a reformed world with new laws, ONGs, commercial and political treaties, and different types of government. For a first important event that happened in 1991 and it transformed the entire political situation in the world, changing completely the political and economic alliances between countries. The event that I'm going to talk about is the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The collapse of the Soviet Union was acclaimed by the West side as a victory for freedom, but it was a triumph of democracy over totalitarianism accompanied with the victory of capitalism over socialism. After the fall of the Soviet Union at the end of the 20th century, the world entered to a new era, an era where communication and technology were the ones that governed the world, and it is known as the digital era, where the most important change for humanity was the invention of the internet, a tool that led us to be communicated with the whole world. And on it, we can search information of any type and makes our life easier. And in 1993, the term triple W was created. That means World Wide Web. With this global term, in every part of the world you can access to any internet page with an internet connection and search for everything you want to. Also, in the last decade, not only the technology and communications are the most important advances around the world. With the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union, so many alliances and treaties were created to establish a good relationship between countries. But for North America, the NAFTA was created. This treaty is a consequence of neoliberalism and also an influence by the European Union that Mexico wanted to start with USA and Canada for economic growth to the three nations, and in this agreement also the restriction for exportation and importation were removed. And hopefully during these last decades the world not only passed by fortunate situations, it also passed by attacks that marked the history of an entire country. And I am talking about the terrorist attack to the World Trade Center that were series of airplanes jackings and suicide attacks by the Al-Qaeda group to the government of the US, where the airplanes crashed the towers. On the last decades, there are terms that match or marked the events that occurred in the last years. On those terms is the unipolar world. That is when in the world exists only one superpower above all the other countries in aspects as economy and political power. And with the fall of the Soviet Union, the world entered to a unipolar world, where the US became that superpower since his competence, the Soviet Union, failed, letting the USA the one and only economic and political power of the world. Another term is the digital era. That is the period of time marked by the digital technology and the invention of the internet and the triple W as an essential part to the search to search anything on the internet and is related to the digital era. The third term that is related to the events happening in the last decades is the globalization, that is the integration of national economies. And the NAFTA is a consequence of globalization, since the reason why it was created was to remove the restrictions of importations and exportations to grow the economy of the three countries of North America. For the last term is the terrorism, that is a strategy used, in the majority of the cases, by a weaker group to a powerful nation to achieve a specific end. That most of the times violence is used to create terror in the population and to generate a quick and violent response of the nation to that group. And the perfect and most famous example of terrorism is the event that I already explained, the attack to the World Trade Center in 2001, where the group Al-Qaeda attacked the government of the United States. But knowing in general what happened in the last decades, what was the reason why globalization emerged? What caused the terrorist attack? What is the relation between the unipolar world with the end of the Cold War, and how does the digital era have influenced the society nowadays? First, the reason why globalization emerged is principally caused by the development of technology that helped the world to be communicated. It helped transport that nowadays is faster and easier to travel. Also, technology helped to share information. And another reason is the growing of multinational companies, trades, and the increase of the financial system, the mobility of labor, mobility of capital, and economic growth, between other more reasons. But the principal two that helped globalization was the development of technology. Then, what caused terrorist attacks in the 20th century? The majority of attacks are manifestations of minority groups to a powerful nation. Most of the times are ideology or religious sentimental shouts from a poor nation that at the end the terrorist groups finished with violent attacks in the name of its nation. Then, what is the relation between the end of the Cold War and the unipolar world? During the war, there were only two superpowers on the world, that were the Soviet Union and the US. When the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union was disintegrated, the competence of US for the dominance of the world disappeared. So the world entered to a unipolar world where the only power with the economic and military resources and politic influence above all the rest of the nations was the US. Finally, the digital era brought the internet to our society, and it also brought the development of computers, communication, and cell phones that nowadays are our principal tool. With it, we make everything. If you want to send a message or search for something, you have to resort to these inventions and advances that the digital era brought. So the digital era have influenced our society to the level that the internet is our principal and first tool that can help us with everything. In the